Hello everyone, this is Joshua Gunnett, and once more I'm coming to you with a video to discuss and demonstrate the latest in Jointbreaker technology. This version that I'm utilising is version 6.3, somewhat verging on version 6.4 due to the release of the Thwackbot Jointbreaker system, but this video is basically here to give an outline as to how this system is different to the previous systems and how you can really, I suppose, set it up for your current machines, and just really break things down for you, because I want people to understand what's really going on here and what's really been developed since the previous version. Now, version 6, for those that are out of the loop, is the latest version that, instead of utilising a fixed number system for HP, as the previous system did, it now basically references the part weight of the Jointbreaker to both calculate the health of the part as well as how much damage a Jointbreaker weapon will deal. It's all based on the mass, the density, or the weight, the SGS of the part itself. Since for those that have I suppose are somewhat familiar with the property system, you might have gone to scroll down to properties. In the part section you can see a mass number here. This number is basically telling you the SGS of the weapon, because that's what Jonatier's SGS weight tool does. It references the mass and just calculates a total from there. It's pretty clever. And yes, how the math works out is, if I'll go into the spinner system here, just to show you how it works, for the Jointbreaker. How it works is it takes the mass of the part, so here, in this pit here, it takes the mass of it all, and assigns its HP based on that mass. So a part that weighs about 50 SGS will have 50 HP. A part that weighs 300 SGS will have 300 HP. And ideally, the higher your mass for a part, the more hits it's going to take, and the less, the more it will survive when it's taking damage. There is a part HP override that's within every damage script. That's only in the for the sake of emergencies, or for when you need to reference the weight of another part for the Jointbreaker itself. For instance, I believe the robot Styrax, built by Primeval, utilizes like a weight ring. Ideally, you can reference the weight ring with the with this Jointbreaker section here. You just have to reference the part, and it will utilize that Jointbreaker's weight for the damage. But you can't reference the HP of it, since that's not how the script was built up. So you'd have to stick in the part HP override into the spinner itself, not the weight ring, and place down the mass of that part as a fixed value. So that way the Jointbreaker knows that whatever is being hit, that's the HP that it has. That's the override. So yeah, everything is more or less done for you, and part HP is only need to be there as an override if for the sake of debugging, or if we need to do some meandering or mixing things about. It's just something. It's not something you have to worry about unless you need to incorporate it, so it's fine. As for the damage, how damage is worked out is that it takes the mass of the part and divides it by what's known as the fairness value. For the spinner system, it's all set in the spinner system here. It's all set in the remote events. But the fairness value, which can be adjusted and set, is in the new JB control area, I believe located in the multiples folder here. As you can see right now, it's reduced by a multiple of, it's divided by a multiple of 10. So a part that deals 25, a part that deals like 25 damage weighs 250 SGS. A part that weighs 100 SGS deals 10 damage per hit. And that's pretty much how it works for the axe overhead system, the crusher system, the piston system, and really that's about it. Every other kind of weapon system has their own little unique system. For instance, the spinner system. How the spinner system works is that if we go into the spin-up system here for the spinner, you can see that the fairness value is of course included, but it's all based on your top speed, or where the speed of the spinner is at the moment. So if you're at quarter speed, you'll be dealing 50% less. Your damage will be the weight of the Jointbreaker divided by, well, really 50%. So a spinner that is at 300 SGS, the maximum amount of weight that you could have really for a part, if it was, it would deal 15 damage on the regular. At half speed, it'll be the exact weight as damage. So it goes at quarter speed 15, half speed 30, and then at top speed it deals 50% more. So it will deal 45 damage. Now, it's all well and good having like these massive damaging weapons, because bear in mind, a weapon that deals 45 damage per hit is ridiculously powerful, but the spin-up system is hard-coded to have the spin-up rate be entirely based on the mass or the weight of the spinner divided by a set value, which is 500, in order to keep it, like, since really when you hold down the key, it's adding the speed every frame. It's not a delay. So in order to make sure it doesn't like instantly spin up, it has to be a sort of like a decimal number, really. So ideally, the lighter the weapon, the faster it will spin up, but the less damage it will deal. And the heavier the weapon, the more time it will take to spin up, but the more damage it will deal. And how the spinner system works, of course, is that it's entirely adjusted now that with the spin down system, whenever you strike a part, the weight of that part will affect how much your spinner spins down. So the higher the weight of that part, the more your spinner will spin down. But the more damaged that part is, the less you'll spin down when striking it. And the less the part that weighs, the less your spin will be affected when it comes to it. So a part that has like 10 SGS will barely affect the spinner of the part it's will barely affect the speed of the spinner when you strike it, and it'll probably just break off instantly, since a part that weighs 10 SGS will probably be like paper in this new system. But a part that's like 150 SGS will probably cause the spinner to just stop, or slow down to such a heavy degree that it will just stop. And for the sake of balance as well, there is a floor reduction value as well. So whenever your part of robot hits the floor or wall, the spinner will reduce by a certain amount. Not as great as a robot, but it still will be notably big. So it's gives, I suppose, spinners a chance to somewhat self-right if they are if the Jointbreaker or the robot spinner really is making contact with the floor, and it also gives robots that are controlling their opponent a chance to slow down their opponent's spinner by just slamming them into the wall, slamming them into the floor, and affecting them that way, which is all well and good. The damage calculation is split off into its own function, and what it does now is that it scales the damage of the part of the like the cracked decals or textures to how much damage it is. So the closer you are to having the part being entirely broken off, the closer you will be to like the more visible really the cracks will become. So it gives so judges will have a good scale as to like or judges, drivers, everyone that's watching will have a good scale as to how close that part is to being broken. This new section here, I quite like this. This affects the custom physical properties of a part. Now, ideally, when it comes to damage systems, you need to have all of your parts' custom physical properties enabled. If you're not doing it, do it, because otherwise, I feel like that's illegal. It's illegal for my competition to have parts that don't have custom physical properties, and honestly, if you don't have custom physical properties enabled, then it means you're not really bothering enough to adjust the weight of your robot and its and all of its parts. So put the effort in, boys and girls. This section is basically here to impact the custom physical properties of the part based on how much it's damaged, to give a different kind of means to how damage be classified. So the aim with this section is that regular parts will have their friction increase the more damage they deal, damage they've taken, meaning that let's say wedges on the ground, like that are dragging across the ground, the more friction they have, the harder it will be to get underneath robots, and the more they'll drag on the ground and mess with your friction. It's meant to sort of mimic like a wedge in like actual Robot Combat competitions being torn apart and catching the ground. That's what it's meant to sort of like mirror there, since trying to have it be mirrored, like having pieces actually rip off in singular bits and having it be off-center and off-kilter or off-orientation, it's just a lot of effort that could just break everything, and I just wanted to go for more. Just keep it simple, really. Just keeping it simple. And the top section here affects the locomotion system. So parts that are wheels or legs or any kind of forms of locomotion will be affected, will have their friction reduced. Will be affected and have the friction reduced. So it will impact the drive of that wheel. So even if that wheel gets struck and it's still surviving on that robot, that wheel's friction is now affected, and that drive on that side is now worse on that wheel, and will probably be notably worse if you look at it. Of course, this is only really possible if you have the locomotion folder located in the Jointbreaker Essentials placed into your wheel or locomotion parts. If the part contains an attachment and it's not the motor or weapon motor, it's designed that way, so that way the motor weapon motor is still treated as an every other part, not a locomotion part. Or if the part has a hinge constraint. In my personal recommendation, if you are going to be building stuff from now on, I do recommend you stick your weapon motor inside, like the hinge constraint inside your vehicle seat. You can do that and it will not affect the connection that you've already made with the hinge constraint. You can move this anywhere you wish and it will still work, just provided that you reference it. And I've just stuck it in the vehicle seat because it's just way easier to reference, and the joint breaker is already set up that way, so you might as well do it. And if you have more than one joint breaker or more than one weapon motor, just have the weapon motor be called weapon motor 2 and reference weapon motor 2 in the joint breaker scripts, and so on and so forth. It's easy. It's easy stuff. You don't need to do much. Yeah, it's even here in the spinner script, just in case you have more stuff. So I think it's the same for every other like overhead system. And yeah, this will deal, and once it reaches max amount of damage, it will destroy every connection that's attached to that part. It will stick smoke into that motor, and it will be as to give that kind of element. Like if a motor is reached max damage, smoke will be in it, and that would be a cool smoke particle effect. Though it's never happened yet. It's always, this has been here since the beginning, but it's never been used. So it's a pretty cool effect. Hopefully we get to see it at some point if a motor is indeed struck, but of course that requires the part to have a hinge constraint in it, have a motor in it, or have a motor in it. I may just adjust it so that it will also look for any kind of attachments in it, but that might be a bit. That might mean that parts that have any kind of like hinge constraint attachment will start smoking, and it might look weird. So, from there is a hit sound mechanic that is being implemented into this system due to recent updates with Roblox that might be put on the back burner. I'm gonna put it in anyway, but due to the way the audios are being, I suppose, cut off, like any audio that's above 6 seconds or 5.5 seconds, to be more specific, is broken off. It's gonna be, that's gonna be it for it, like, really. So, any hit sounds that are below 5.5 seconds, you can utilize it and put it in there, and every time it hits, it will play that hit sound. But, yeah, that's pretty cool. As for any of the other weapon systems, the flamethrower systems, of course, they've been relatively unchanged, except they've got they're more on a fixed damage value that's set in the Jointbreaker on the JB control section, and of course parts that are burned are still having their colours adjusted. Projectile system, its damage is based entirely on the weight of the projectile, but it's also doubled as well. So the weight of the projectile, the damage you deal with the projectile, will be the weight of the projectile times 2. So, yeah, but bear in mind that the weight of the projectile, or really the projectiles, will count towards the part limit, or the weight limit of your entire robot. So if you have 10 projectiles that weigh about 10 SGS, then that's 100 SGS that you can't put into your robot because you're carrying about 10 ammunition. So you have to be somewhat conservative, and that's why I've had to double their damage for us. That way, at least you have the ability to do a lot of damage with it. Or, I mean, you could be entirely cheeky and have like just one Jointbreaker, one ammo that's just 300 SGS projectile, and you fire it and deal about 60 damage. Would be the highest you could ever do. But that's 300 SGS you can't put into your robot, which is quite comical. As for the hammer saw system, follows a similar system to the spinner system, where it will like every hit it will deal damage based upon the velocity, on the how fast you're spinning, the weight of the spinner, and yeah, they're two very similar systems. But for the saw system, like cutting saw system and the crusher system, once you reach a certain like damage value, basically half the value, you let's say for instance crusher deals 150 damage to a 300 SGS part, that crusher Jointbreaker can now no collide with that Jointbreaker part and push into it and damage parts that are beneath it, effectively just, well, penetrating through. It's the same with the saw blade system. That's what it does. So it allows for crushers and saw blades to potentially strike parts that you don't want to be struck and hit critical areas that really you don't want to be affected. So that's pretty cool. The tire shredder system, it's been adjusted and amplified to effectively now whenever you touch this red brick, it will deal a set amount of damage. I believe it's either a set amount of damage or it's based on the weight. No, yeah, it is a set amount of damage. So it'll deal a set amount of damage when you walk over it, much like the flamethrower systems, except if it touches wheels or any kind of parts that contain like locomotion, already the locomotion folder, which is why it's required for you to put it in, it will do double damage. So this basically will affect tires, legs, you name it. The tether projectile system, similar system to how the projectile system works, except it's better. It will retract slowly and then weld back to this the pink firing brick, which is a new system, which is quite cool. I recommend just playing around with a lot of these and just seeing how they work before you implement them into your machine. And the flatbot system, basically, if it tracks the assembly angular velocity of the velocity checker in here, which has been you can't quite see it at the moment because it's covered by weld constraints. But that's what it looks like now. It's coloured in blue instead of red to signify a different velocity checker. And it tracks the assembly angular velocity, so whenever it rotates, so like when a flatbot does like a torque reaction thing where it swings backwards and forwards, it will track that and deal damage if it strikes something. It will also track when a flatbot spins around, and will deal damage based on that, the velocity of your spinner, of your spin, plus the weight of the joint breaker. So it's a mixture of the two, and it does deal quite hefty damage. Flatbots can definitely do something, so really do look into that. It's pretty cool. There's also provided with it also is the strengthometer for flippers to test out their flipper limits and limit how high they can flip. And the test block is there for you to test on damage. Each one is weighed to an exact value. So 50 for light, 100 for medium, 150 for heavy, and 300 for super heavy. So to test how much damage you're dealing to each of these things with your weapons. Fall damage and wall damage has been adjusted as well. With fall damage and wall damage, the blocks are mainly remain the same, but the math is different for the velocity checker, and I'll get that up for you. How the velocity checker now works is that the fall damage is now entirely based on the velocity of how fast you fall when hitting the fall damage hitbox. You have to be a minimum speed in order to really get damage when you fall in the Y axis. And the Z-axis, X and Z-axis follow the same thing for the velocity checker. It tracks how fast you're moving in the X and Z, and applies damage based on how hard you hit that wall, with a minimum velocity just in case. There is still a bit of finickiness with the wall damage system, I'm afraid, where if you are touching or somewhat grinding up against it, you will still take damage on those parts that are being grinded up against it. I wouldn't really say it's somewhat unrealistic, but there are moments, where you can drive up along that wall, and if you are ending up to driving on the wall damage script, somehow driving up the wall, and it might deal damage to you. So it's something to keep an eye on, and hopefully you won't drive up the wall and deal damage to yourself. It's just something to be careful of, and something that is still being looked into. If anyone can fix it, I will happily apply the fix into the system and all be well. But yeah, it's something that needs to be addressed eventually. As for future developments, there's a battery system. I know one of the building members here, Foxy, has already done a kind of battery system. This is going to be my own battery system, my own little incorporation with the Jointbreaker systems. Foxy's done her own thing, and hats off to her for it. If her system's going to be better than mine, I'm going to ask her for permission to stick it in, give her the credit, and it'll be fine. But I want to give it my own crack, my own kind of system, just to see how it goes, to see if people enjoy it or not, since this Jointbreaker system is meant to be applicable for everyone, utilised by everyone, adjusted by everyone, for everyone really. It's a great system. And I suppose really, to somewhat round off this video, is to let you know how to set up your robot. How do we set up a Jointbreaker system? Well, it's quite simple when we get down to it. So, take your robot, any kind of design, and choose the appropriate system or weapon system that befits your design. So I'm going to go with spinner, because 90% of arguably 80% of our robots are spinners. So let's go with the spinner system. So what you do is you take the spinner system, you take the Jointbreaker script, you take the Jointbreaker script, the sparks and the hit sound bits, copy them, and just paste it into the part that's going to be the Jointbreaker in your robot. So I'm just going to paste them in here for example's sake. Name it like Jointbreaker or JB. Naming it does nothing for the script. The script is always the Jointbreaker script is always being tracked anyway by other scripts. The exact naming conventions and namesake of it. So you don't have to name. So you could name it Bingus. and it will still find the joint breaker. But ideally, for the sake of it, and for tournament hosts and for quality control sake, name it Jointbreaker or JB, JB1, JB2, just as long as a J and B is involved, or a Jointbreaker is involved in the name, it's good. Next to the Jointbreaker, what you do is you reference your robot's name in it. So example robot name. So let's say, for instance, like, you know, I'll take my robot. My robot's name is Atrox. I put my name Atrox in there. Boosh. It now knows where the Atrox model is. And from there, you then do... you don't need to do anything with weapon active. You don't need to do anything with Jointbreaker unless the Jointbreaker... unless you are a special case where you need to reference the weight of another part in order to... like, have it deal with, like, for the sake of damage, like Leptostyrex's weight ring kind of thing. Like, the comment here is meant to say that anyway, and it's also mentioned in the README in the Jointbreaker Essentials. If you want to read that over, I did recommend reading it. Don't need to do anything about damage max, don't need to do anything about damage val, don't need to do anything about damage add, so just leave a lot of this alone. Like, leave this entire section alone. Aside from weapon motor, you need to either reference what the weapon motor is, or stick the weapon motor in your vehicle seat. And you're done. Good stuff. So basically stick the hinge constraint in the vehicle seat. Don't stick the attachments in the vehicle seat. Just stick the hinge constraints. Don't stick the part inside of the vehicle seat. Just stick the hinge constraint in the vehicle seat. And reference its name accordingly. Exactly. Floor reduction, don't need to do anything. Top speed, don't need to do anything. End top speed for negative top speed, don't need to do anything. All of these, don't need to do anything. All of this is done for you. Automatic, 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 automatic. It's all automatic. You just need to change a few references here and there at the top, and the Jointbreaker is set up. It's done. For this section anyway. Next, you then have to go into your... you need to set up the spinner. So, ideally for setting up the spinner, you need to go into the spinner system, copy over the services really here, because I will only allow these services to be utilized. Any Jointbreaker, like the Jointbreaker systems, can only be utilized for Jointbreaker competitions, for battle competitions, because they've been specifically built to make this as realistic as possible, and built this way to give that kind of realistic damage feel. You can't use any kind of outsourced like scripts unless they are approved by myself or other things. For overheads, you could kind of have like an instantaneous swing thing anyway. I feel like they've got that anyway. And for like hammer saws, you can do that anyway as well. For like the instantaneous swing, instead of it being like at the lifter system where it slowly moves up and down, you can do that. That's fine. It's entirely up to you, really. But utilize this system. Don't do anything else. Don't really use anything that isn't sanctioned by your host. So yeah, go into the spinner system. The spinner system is automatically set to utilizing the spin up and spin down systems. There's also the maintain system here and the spinner deactivate system here. And the weapon deactivates. Basically, it's set on a key down, key up kind of thing, and that's how it's going to remain, because it needs to be set this way in order to actually work properly. Yeah. As for reverse spin and reverse spin and negative spin down, these are there in case that when you do spin up and spin down and set it that way, the spinner spins in the wrong direction. So you can just be like, oh, it spins in the wrong direction. Bosh, and then just do like, you know, bang. Yeah, there you go. There's also reverse spin as well, just in case you want your spinner to spin the other way, just like, you know, spin the other way around. Um, yeah, so it's like, so if you want, yeah, like I said, if you want to spin it, if it's spinning the wrong direction, do this, do this, do this, do this. There you go. Now it spins the other way. Now it spins the other way, and it's fine. No issues. Maintain. You don't need to do anything about maintain. Maintain is the same for each and every sort of script there. It's all good. Yeah, and the resources are also there for you if you want to have like a reverse spin down as well, just in case. So if you want to have a reverse spin down, you just pardon me. Now, for instance, if you wanted the spinner to spin the other direction, if you want the spinner to spin both ways and deal damage both ways, remove that, do that, done. Don't need to do anything else. So, for instance, basically, the normal default, it's set like this. If it's spinning in the wrong direction, remove this, put this in, that's fine. If you want your spinner to spin in the other direction, you remove this. Like, if you want it to spin both ways, that's the configuration. Done. The work is basically there for you. You just don't you don't need to do much work. You really don't. It's already all set there for you. You just need to set it up, and you just need to reference stuff accordingly. And of course, as per usual in the spin-up systems, put your name of your robot in there, put where your motor is. If you have more than one weapon motor, reference it. If you have more than one joint breaker, reference it. Reference the two of them, and make sure that it's all set up there. It's all there for you. I've basically put in all the effort for you. You just need to put in the right references here and there. It's all good. So yeah, that is how the system works. And a lot of these values and stuff for tournament hosts, if you need to adjust any values, you just go into the JB control system here and there. Oh yeah, another little thing that's been added. Wall damage and fall damage, when you hit them now, they spawn in a spark effect whenever you hit them. So it lets you know that you've taken fall damage or wall damage, and it's just stored in the JB control section. And yeah, that's just how the system works. If you have any questions, please let me know. And I suppose for the sake of it, I'll give a little demonstration for the spinner system, just to show you more or less how it works with my character. So right now, just that lets you know it's on. So I'm just going to spin up. Right now the spinner is set to 240, I think 250, like the joint breaker is still up to 250. Because bear in mind, it's utilising the weight of the joint breaker part itself as a means to decide the weight of the spin up, the spin down. As you can see, like the more it weighs, the more it's going to struggle to spin down and spin up again. So it's pretty cool. So I'm going to set it up to top speed, and I'm going to have it hit. So effectively at top speed, this should do about 36 damage. Yep. And you can see that the spin, it's not entirely span down to 0. It's gone down to 30. But if I just hit it again, this should be an even less spin down. Yeah, there you go, 58. You see that the more the part is damaged, the less it's just affected. And it's going to be different when we hit, let's say, a 150 SGS part. So I'm going to spin it back up to full. Basically 0. Impacts the entire spinner, just stops it completely. For those, so you got to be careful when you're hitting something tough, because it will just slow you down. But if you hit it again, 19, as you can see. And again. There you go. 38. Yeah. And that's how it works. So yes, thank you of course for watching this video. If you have any questions once more, just let me know. I'm going to be sending out the new kit with the Thwackbot system soon, after this video is released. Well, probably by the time you see this video, it will already be released. But yes, this is how the operation works. If you have any questions, just let me know. And, oh yeah, one last tip for setting up your robot. Make sure that your velocity checker is placed into the exact center of your robot. And make sure that damage XZ and damage Y, these values here, are placed into the robot's model, not within a model within a robot's model, just within the model, because it's needed for so that way the wall damage and fall damage blocks can reference them correctly. Place your locomotion folders in all the areas that are utilized for locomotion for your movement, and part HP, don't utilize it unless you need unless it's needed. And it's not needed unless you have a special kind of case where you need to reference the weight of another part, which you don't need to. So yeah, thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, once more, just ask.